On July 8, 1980, 19-year-old George Larsson decided to join his friends on a trip to Action Park, which is located in Vernon, New Jersey, a short drive from where he grew up in Hamburg. It was not the first time that George visited the notorious Action Park. It was actually quite a hit back then. It was known to be a very dangerous place, but thrill-seekers loved it, for it represented the ultimate adrenaline rush. For many New Jersey residents, the park brings back cheerful childhood memories, but for quite many others, it was a nightmare from hell. On that day, George Larsson decided to hit the notoriously dangerous Alpine slide. Unfortunately, he got more than just an adrenaline rush and ended up flying 25 feet headfirst into a rock. A week later, on July 19th, he died from his injuries. Action Park was a crazy, unsafe place. It was even known as Class Action Park, Traction Park, and Accident Park for the many burns, bruises, serious injuries, and deaths that the park rides produced. In 1978, Action Park was opened in Vernon, New Jersey. It was one of the first modern water parks in the United States. Since its inception, it was designed to be sort of dangerous, because the founder and CEO Gene Mulhivill's philosophy was that amusement park visitors should be in control of their experience. He literally had it designed in a way where patrons managed the rides, including how fast and how high they went. This vision proved to be reckless and dangerous. Everything in the park was just inherently flawed and plain dangerous, not to mention made of poor materials. As for the design, it was simply cheap. The extreme Alpine slide which killed George Larsson was essentially a giant track to rip people's skin off, yet the park advertised it as a fun water ride for children. The lousy water slide featured a 2,700 feet long, cement and fiberglass-filled track that naive patrons rode down in a wheeled cart. To get on the slide, one must first take a ski lift to the summit, where they were greeted by photographs of injured children, accompanied by a warning for riders to keep their arms inside their carts. Little did the riders know, the photographs were just for show, and the park's safety standards were not only very low and trashy, but non-existent altogether. Nevertheless, people still liked it because they had control over the speed of the cart during the long, erratic slide downhill. People loved it, even though they knew that most of the time, most of the carts were broken and the brakes didn't work. Some carts didn't even have brakes altogether, and for some reason the patrons, including George Larsson, still took the chance to get the irresistible thrill experience. What was even more disturbing about the Alpine slide is the fact that many of the cart's brakes were frequently locked, which meant the rider would end up crawling rather slowly down the slide, inevitably being hit in the back by another faster rider. The Alpine slide was just dangerous. It killed George Larsson. According to reports, it also seriously injured at least 26 people. Some of these injuries were in the head, while others were fractures. In total, 6 people were killed by Alpine Park. The Alpine slide was not the only deadly ride in Action Park. One of the park's most notable attractions was the tidal wave pool, which was also one of the first to open in the United States. It was also notoriously dangerous. In fact, it was nicknamed the Grave Pool. It was filled with fresh water, not seawater, which made patrons less buoyant and left strong swimmers and non-swimmers alike literally in over their heads as they got blasted with meter-high waves. It was so deadly, more than a dozen lifeguards were assigned to keep the patrons safe. They rescued, on average, 30 people a day, and even more on high-traffic weekends. Ironically, the Grave Pool was not the most deadly ride in Action Park. That title was held by the infamous Cannonball Loop, an enclosed water slide with a complete vertical loop. After it was installed, the park owners sent a dummy doll on a test run of the ride, and it came back headless. The owners even offered willing employees $100 to help with the tests. Most of the naive employees that were probably coerced to be part of the experiment returned from the loop of death with bloody noses and bruises, but still, The owners decided to open the ride anyway. However, it was shut down a month later, for it was just way too dangerous and scary. George Larsson was not different from the masses. The thrill of the dangerous rides kept him coming back, summer after summer. It was also the park's anything goes, choose-your-own-adventure mentality that contributed to the high number of visitors despite the bad rep and obvious safety issues. The park was so out of control, doctors who treated the many injuries incurred at the park noted that most of the patients were intoxicated regardless of their age. Even the employees were allowed to drink while on duty. Many of the accidents that took place at Action Park were quite ugly. The fatalities were just horrendous. But the most hideous and upsetting of the incidents was the death of George Larsson. The brakes on his slide did not work at all and caused his slide to gain extreme speed, which evidently caused his sled to run off the track. He fell into an embankment and hit his head on a rock, an injury that sent him into a coma for a week and killed him a week later. His life was cut short as a result of what can only be described as a death trap with the facade of a theme water park. The tragedy hit his family quite hard. He was even supposed to be the best man at his brother's wedding days after he died. His family ended up accepting a $100,000 settlement with the park, mainly because they simply could not live there anymore, because everything reminded them of their dead son George. According to records, the park was hit with hundreds of lawsuits over its lifetime. George's death wrecked his family so hard they soon moved to Florida, because they couldn't stand being there anymore. What was just as disturbing as the incident itself back then was the reckless behavior and arrogance of the park's owners. The park's owner and founder, Gene Mulheville, even went as far as telling reporters that Larsson was an employee, that he was riding at night, and that it had been raining, which all turned out to be quite a big lie. The incident took place in the afternoon, and George did not work there. Sneaky Mulheville told this BS story because if Larsson was an employee, he wasn't required to report this death to the state. Even the park's spokeswoman Wesley Smith did not bother to express any remorse. She even went as far as denying that the incident was the park's fault. She told the media that the ride didn't injure Larsson and it was a rock 20 feet away that hurt him. It took the death of George Larsson and 5 others, in addition to hundreds of injuries, to finally shut down the Action Park in 1996. In 2010, Mulvihill led a committee to buy the park back. It reopened in 2014 with a new name, Mountain Creek Water Park, and now advertises its trained lifeguard staff and stringent, up-to-date safety features. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell button to get notified every time we upload a new video that will take you to the heart of the scenes and mysteries of some of the most terrifying incidents, accidents, disasters, and paranormal events from around the world.